On today's World Insight, global business CEOs, how they make decisions amid uncertainties and geopolitical tensions. We'll hear results of a global CEO survey and what they mean from Mohamed Kande, the global chairman of business consulting firm PwC, and what the transition to clean energy like solar power means for green industries from the CEO of Trina Solar, one of China's biggest solar producers.
Hello and welcome to World Insight, our special program amid all the changes. I'm Tian Wei at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The International Monetary Fund says the world's economy's growth this year is projected to remain stable at 3.3%. That's 0.4% below the average over the first 2 decades of the 2000s. In China, the recovery momentum with new growth drivers bodes well for 2025. China's focus on high-quality development and high-level opening up could bring more surprises to the world economy. On Wednesday, I moderated a panel discussion co-produced by CGTN and the World Economic Forum on the theme Decoding China's Economy, Present and Future. Industry specialists, experts, and stakeholders unpack the present and future of China's economy. The World Economic Forum Global Risk Report 2025 reveals an even fractured global landscape amid geopolitical tensions, environmental and technological challenges. In the complex and dynamic context, global business leaders are eager to grow more resiliently. The PwC publishes their annual Global CEO survey to find out the concerns and expectations of global CEOs on the economy. So how exactly do they prepare for uncertainties? What are their top concerns over investment? I asked Mohamed Kande, the PwC Global Chairman. Mohamed, good to see you in Davos.
Great to see you again.
The world is changing so fast, and your Global CEO survey is trying to get a grasp of it. So at the very beginning, if I remember right, of that report of the Global CEO survey, there is a quote talking about the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. What exactly do you mean?
What I mean by the future is already here is because of some of the signals we are getting from many of the CEOs. The future is already here because we are seeing a lot of investments in technology, in clean energy or green energy. We are seeing a lot of capital being deployed by many corporations around the world. And the future is already there because many corporations are now adopting Gen AI. So we are in a new age of innovation. And the future is already there. Why? Because it's only the beginning to see great things that will happen in different economies around the world because of all of the capital and all the investment that we're seeing around the world.
In the survey, it was mentioned that earlier people pin more hope for growth in terms of GAI. But now people are seeing it is an incremental process. Can you help us to analyze what is really behind this?
What we are finding out with generative AI is the same thing that we saw with a lot of new technology in the past. The first way corporations really adopt technology is for productivity improvement, for efficiencies. And what we are finding out of the survey that a lot of companies today are seeing the benefits of using Gen AI. And one of the best use cases are around getting efficiency and productivity improvement. But we are now seeing that there is a little bit of a pivot to understand how to use generative AI in new products and services to increase profitability and to increase revenue. Now, this has been more slower than we thought. For example, we had last year more than 40% of the companies saying that they will see productivity improvement using Gen AI the following year. What we find out is that it's only 34% of them that really get the profitability improvement. Therefore, there is a little bit of a delay effect, but we are seeing the trend coming towards saying that productivity improvement is how you start by using Gen AI, but more and more corporations are thinking about how do I make money using Gen AI.
Also in your survey, I noticed there are many moving factors about business being mentioned. One thing is about the length of term for global CEOs. Instead of thinking long term, they have to think about their own term. That's when they can make the decisions. So how is both the governance structure and the planning vis-a-vis the technology transformation and the geopolitical change, all of these moving factors, how do you read all of this together?
You know, it's very interesting. We call it the 10-year gap, which means that...
I think that's a good term.
Yeah, because we see that benefits from adoption of new technologies, benefits of reinvention, take time.
And a lot of investment.
And a lot of investment, a lot of capital gets deployed. And sometimes we're also saying that you have some successes and you have some failures.
Yeah, sure.
Because you have to make bets. In times of uncertainty, what you have to do is to have enough options and make choices. In times of certainty, we know the answer. So it's easier to make bets. So we are now finding ourselves with times of maximum uncertainty. So CEOs have to make bets about what the future is going to be. And depending on what the length of the tenure, they are making more bets that align with the tenure that they have. But it's a reframing of the problem that we're trying to solve. As leaders of organizations, CEOs should be thinking about making bets or making choices for the long-term viability of the companies that they lead, also serve.
We have seen this interesting twists and turns over the past few months. And the biggest news of today is not only the World Economic Forum begins, but also the inauguration of a new president in the United States. And together with it, some people say there can be more uncertainties. Others say leadership style might be changing. There are also those who comment that those who have been together will be ever closer together. So what is your view as a global CEO, especially when you talk to many of them through this global CEO survey?
So I will share some of the feedback we are receiving from many global CEOs. You know, we are at an inflection point. When again, we talked about all of the money that is being spent in technology, in the energy transition, and companies today dealing with geopolitical tension. But what we are finding out that a lot of the companies are not changing their strategies. They know what they want to do. They will allocate the right capital. They will spend the right amount of money, find the right people. It's not what they are going to do. It's how they're going to do it to adapt to the current situation. But they have made choices. They have made decisions about where they want to take their companies. That is why the Global CEO Survey is telling us that now the number of CEOs that expect the economy to grow is now 58%, very close to 60%. They have hope for growth. What does it mean to believe that there will be growth?
Yeah.
That's a leading indicator to say that CEOs, when they believe that we will have economic growth, they allocate capital, they spend money, they hire people. So they have that confidence. They're making the decisions. They are taking the choices. The question is how, depending on geopolitical tension, etc. So what we are seeing is that independent of all the politics that we have, the CEO confidence was in the 70s during the COVID times, dropped all the way to 18% 3 years ago. Now it's back to 58. You know what this means? CEOs are adapting. And they're going to run the businesses because they have the responsibility to the stakeholders and to their own people.
Short-term, long-term, always important to work together. But the supply chain changes we have seen over the past few years, some suggest that the speed will be much faster than what we already see. But others say, well, it's not likely to be, tremendous. What is your observation so far? Is it going to be more regional-wise, or is it going to be global? How do you see, trade policies that are likely to change over the next few months having a huge impact or not on global CEOs' mentality?
I mean, global CEOs will have the ability to adapt, as we say. So, independent of where the tariffs are going to play, the trade policies that we're having. But it's not just the tariff and trade policies. It's also about the geopolitical tension that you have in certain countries. And sometimes it's also cyber risk that can also stop some of the supply chains. So what we believe is that global CEOs are going to adapt when it comes to understanding how to manage the supply chains. There was this trend around more localization of supply chains, but it depends on which industry that you have the localization. Some industry you cannot localize the supply chain, whether you want it or not. So we have to be we are very careful about what, general statements around all supply chain localized. For some of them, it's literally impossible.
Is it overemphasized or
It's
overstated?
overemphasized because one of the things that we're finding out is where you have convergence of industries, like the technology industries, when I say technology industry, it could be telecom, it could be internet, it could be big tech, with the need for generative AI and the data centers and the need for green energy. We are actually now looking at this new ecosystem from technology to data centers to energy, globalizing faster than ever, not localizing.
That's very interesting. What does it tell us?
It tells us that basically CEOs that will always try to be very, very efficient for the stakeholders and economic benefit for the companies that they run and making the right choices for the businesses is always going to be the primary driver.
What about your industry?
So I always tell my colleagues that we were created, our profession, by the first industrial revolution because of banks deploying a lot of capital from the UK to the US and needing accountants to make sure that the money was spent the right way. So we are going to adopt and embrace the next intelligent age. We are going to use technology also to evaluate the different business models that we have. And as you know, that we are multidisciplinary. Yes. So some of the businesses, based on regulations, will have to be more decentralized because they live based on local regulations. Some of the other businesses that we have are either regional or global businesses that we have. So it depends. The critical thing is to not have one size fits all when you're running multiple businesses at the same time, because that's easy leadership. We are more sophisticated than that.
Well said. But it takes a lot of energy in order to do that. Clear cut is so easy, and sometimes you wouldn't see the result within 4 years, right? And everybody would say, oh, that's the best decision. But then?
In time of uncertainty, the decision-making process of leadership is extremely important because you have to make choices when you don't have the answers.
You interacted with China very often as a global CEO. You suggested during your latest trip to China that there has been sustainable innovation. What do you think can be, as a global CEO, the best way for China to communicate with the rest of the world and also for all of us to have a win-win situation, as you say?
The first thing that we have to do is to close that information gap because today you have a lot of innovation currently happening in China, in the private sector.
Like what?
Sustainable energy, green energy, renewable energy, and many other artificial intelligence, but the rest of the world needs to know. My recommendation is for all the great things that are currently being done in China to communicate them to the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world is going to come to China.
Your background spans what they call so-called global north, so-called global south. What does that mean to you as a global CEO, to be able to be grounded in so many different circumstances and think about how to link them together, rather think from very different perspective, probably only making that decision process ever more challenging?
My first learning was not to project one way of thinking one part of the world into another part of the world. To learn to put myself into other people's shoes and to listen, not but by what's being said, but to listen to the environment and to understand that people are very different. It was a privilege for me to live in all these different countries, to be able to, I mentioned to you that my first trip to Hong Kong was in 1994. Yes, I worked in Thailand in 1994, in Israel, in Dubai, many parts of the world. I was educated in France. It was a gift. It was a gift of understanding and the gift of resilience, but also the gift of, if I may say, of always trying and never let anybody tell you no. Because the stories are always being told when we have arrived. The stories are not told about what it took to get there. And as I mentioned to you, choices, I've got some good successes, but I've also failed a lot.
No ordinary time, no simple reality, no easy answer. This week, I'm in Davos as the World Economic Forum's annual meeting convenes. Significant stakeholders gather to figure out all major changes, compare notes on what they mean, and work for coordination and cooperation. From the snowy Swiss Alps, we will bring you leading newsmaker interviews, key panels on Chinese economy, and top tech discussions. Welcome to World Insight Special amid all changes. Right after the inauguration of the U.S. President Donald Trump, he kicks off his second term with a flurry of executive orders, including the U.S. withdrawal again from the Paris Climate Agreement, which sparked heated worldwide discussion. At the ongoing World Economic Forum 2025 annual meeting, global leaders reiterated their commitment to the agreement, underlining the opportunities brought by green transition worldwide. In a speech delivered by Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang at the forum, he mentioned that 70% of the photovoltaic components and 60% of wind power equipment worldwide come from China, and that's China's contribution to the world. China's high-quality production capacity has greatly boosted the global green development. On the sideline of the annual meeting at World Economic Forum, I found one of the leading voices of global green transition. Trina Solar, a leading Chinese solar technology and manufacturing company that are working around the world. I had this exclusive talk with this young and dynamic leader, Katherine Gao Haichun, the co-chair of Trina Solar. Some suggest that the U.S. has already decided to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, and whether there will be still as much interest in green industry as it used to be. What is your take as a business insider?
I think green transition these days, it's not just a matter of sustainability. It's also an economic choice. Why do I say this? I think there is definitely an economic foundation for the green transition globally. I still remember that almost a decade ago, solar energy was still really, really expensive, needing many subsidies from the supply and also demand side. But these days, I can share with you some of the projects that we're doing. We're doing some projects in the Middle East where the sun is very abundant. The electricity we generated, the cost can be as low as 1 cent per kilowatt hour, which we think is possibly the lowest energy cost in human history. I think that's the foundation for energy transition, not just that we focus on the long-term sustainability. So we think that that economic transition really changed the equation. So I think it's not a matter of whether you want to focus on ESG or whether you care about human beings in the next 100 years or so. It's about whether you want to lower your energy cost, whether you want to have a more reliable, more secure, more green, and also more accessible energy form. I think that's why our customers are choosing renewable energy over traditional energy. It's not just about a personal choice, it's about an economic choice that's most suitable for the enterprises.
But what does that mean, for example, to your industry, intense competition, not only in China, but now all over the world, you see greater players coming onto the scene. What does that say to you as a leading player in the industry, which has been the kids on the block for quite some time?
Actually, we welcome competition, and we think that it's only in an emerging industry that you see that kind of competition, right? If the industry is, moving in a very
it's not
flat
a sunset
rate,
industry, it's a sunrise industry.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely because solar energy and also renewable energy, it's a booming industry. And also we think that investing in solar, it's not just betting on the future, it's shaping the future. So we think that competition is very natural, right? But we do not want to overcompete. I think being an enterprise, you have to create value for the customers. That's the only reason that you survive. So I think instead of competing in the supply chain, for us, we would like to move from what we call involution to evolution.
What does that mean?
Evolution. So we think that the renewable energy industry has moved to a tipping point. That tipping point is related to the economic foundation that I just mentioned. So for the past 30 years, the entire industry is focusing on one thing and one thing only. That's to push the cost of solar energy further down so that it can compete with traditional energy, so it can replace traditional energy, so it makes economic sense. So for the last 30 years, most of the efforts, most of the resources in the industry are poured into the upstream, into innovation in technology, into massive manufacturing, into lowering the cost of production. But right now we are at a tipping point where the price of solar is already the cheapest.
1 cent?
Yes, 1 cent, which is really amazing. Right. But right now, the major block, or we think that the things that are slowing the demand side is no longer whether we have a better solar product anymore. We can say that our solar product is really, really advanced. But right now, a even better efficiency in the solar cells might not drive the demand. Right. So what are the factors? The factors are systematic. So whether you have a smart power grid to take in all those renewable energies, because renewable energy by nature it's flexible, it's distributed. So we have to build a new smart power grid around renewables, rather than I just push all the renewables to a traditional power grid. Because for the last century, the power grid remained the same, pretty much the same. It's one way, it's top down, it's centralized. But right now, with all those renewables, everything's changing. We think we are facing the most important strategy switch for the past almost 30 years. We're switching from a solar product manufacturer to a solar energy, or we call a renewable energy total solutions provider.
What does it take to make that switch? Now, what are you thinking most every day in a way?
The biggest shift today is not just technology. It's not just business model. It's how you envision the future. It's how you identify yourself. It's how you manage your organization, what we call psychology or mentality. So we are moving from a product-driven industry to a customer-driven, solution-driven industry. So I think the first thing I have to say is I have to change the organization psychology in order for all that to happen. But we think that we have the gene, and we have already established, I think, some successful results. In China, we actually have moved a long way into providing total solutions and to customers, to end customers, not only to business. Because traditionally, solar energy was a 2B business. It's not a 2C business. But so in the rural area in China, there are 500 million households in the rural area in China, and their roofs are empty, right? Their roofs are used to, the Chinese farmers used to put the agriculture on the rooftop for the sun to dry them. But these days, with all the automation, there's no longer needed. So the rooftop is a best fit for solar energy. And it can create what we call a very small microgrid. So you can have the solar energy on the roof, producing the energy to the residential users just below them. So we can create what we call a small ecosystem to better stabilize.
Is it enough for many of them?
It's maybe 10 times more than the energy.
And then you can send the extra to the grid.
Exactly. So by establishing this kind of business model, we create a green energy source for all of the residential end users. They can use green energy from their roof, and the energy they generated is cheaper from what they bought from the power grid.
I know you're also doing similar things in other parts of the world, right?
Yes, we are moving to Europe and also some countries in Asia as well.
People here in Europe, for example, or in other parts of the world, they don't know enough about what China can offer or your industries can offer. They only hear vague ideas about taking away the jobs, but never thought about how much jobs this actually could create in the local places. So what do you make of this information deficit in terms of green?
I think telling a Chinese story in green transition is definitely really important. I think I can share some examples. So by the end of 2024 last year, the installation of green energy in China has exceeded the installation of coal, which is, I think, really magnificent because China is used to be such a coal-centric energy entity. So I think China itself has done a lot, and we're also through our enterprises, we are creating a lot of jobs related to the renewable energy sectors in Europe, in America, in everywhere in the country.
We understand there might be invitations coming from the new administration in the United States for businesses to invest in the United States. Meanwhile, we also see Chinese businesses are having a new huge wave of going global. How do you see, invitations from different economies vis-a-vis Chinese businesses, especially private ones, drive to go global once again in the new era?
We live in a very unpredictable world, but I think that also gives opportunities for companies who are ready. I think we are going towards a globalization 3.0 era where we have to create a comprehensive solutions not only for the customers, but we also have to really combine with local players, local partners. So for most of the manufacturing bases that we establish in foreign countries, we form a JV or we form an even closer collaboration model with the local partner so that we become local company as well. So I think that's really an opportunity we have to grasp.
Katherine, what a pleasure seeing you here once again for the yearly reunion.
Lovely to see you.
Good to see you. I'll check back with you about how that process is going, the new ecosystem.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight, check out our YouTube channel, follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of my team here in Davos and the team in Beijing, thank you so much for tuning in to our special program, Amid All Changes. From the Swiss Alps, thank you for being with us, and I'll see you tomorrow.